Pemmican is the original and, in my opinion, still the absolute best power bar. It is calorie dense and packed with everything your body needs for sustained activity. In North America, Pemmican has a long history of fueling voyages and exploration across the country. And because it's so good at doing that, it became a major trade item during the fur trade era. Now, I've shown how to make pemmican with modern equipment, and if you're interested in that, I'm gonna give you a link in the video description. But in this video, I wanted to take a step back to its origins and make a batch with what they would have had back then, back before dehydrators and food processors. The recipe for pemmican is very simple. It's just equal parts some sort of dried protein. So today we're going to be using venison. I've seen recipes where people have used fish in the past. Basically, it's whatever you have on hand. The key though is that it has to be very, very dry. The second part is rendered fat, and again, the key to this is that it has to be very dry if you want to keep this pemmican for a long time. And then we're also going to be adding dried berries to this. The berries are optional. Historically, sometimes it would have been made with berries, sometimes not. It just depends on what they wanted to make what they wanted to use the pemmican for. To get this process started, we're going to dry venison just in the open air. Now, for this venison to dry properly, it needs to be sliced very thin as you can get it. Now, because the fat will never fully dry in the air like this, we need to make sure that we cut all of that stuff off. We're going to add the fat back in later in the process after it's rendered. People have been air drying meat just like this for thousands of years, and when the conditions are right, it works surprisingly fast and very, very well. So the optimal conditions for air drying meat are going to be warm, sunny day and low humidity. A little bit of breeze also helps a lot. If you're in colder climates or a more humid area, you might need to dry your meat over a fire or inside of a primitive smoker like we're doing here. So I've got this basket of meat here that's completely dry. I just left this in the sun well beyond the initial drying period, just out in the sun, and it gets like almost bone dry, and that is the consistency that you want for pemmican. This is just a big piece of basalt that I found that was kind of naturally dished out, and then I just kind of refined it a little bit just by pecking at it, blowing the dust away and just continue to peck at it. But as you use these things, they just get more and more dished out. And some of the old ones, those big stones, are still out there, and they've been found with the mortar still in there, just sitting in there from 1,000 years ago. So we're going to take this this dried venison, and we'll just put it on our mortar and pestle and grind this stuff into a powder. The finer, the better. When you're selecting meat to dry for pemmican, you want to trim off all of the fat, because the fat doesn't dry out as much as it needs to. You need this meat to be completely dry, and the only way to do that is to trim off all of that fat. Sometimes you have pieces of like sinew and stuff in there like that, and you can just give that to the dogs. The second part is rendered fat. For this batch of pemmican, I'm going to be using bison tallow, and I'm going to start by cutting this fat into small cubes so that we can render it out. The type of fat you use will affect the texture of your pemmican. Some fats like beef and bison tallow, deer and elk fat, these are solid at room temperature and form a nice solid bar of pemmican that you can just wrap up and take with you on a trip. It's more like a modern power bar. On the other hand, fats from animals like bears, pigs, beaver, raccoons, stuff like that, those make lard, which are much softer and never really set up like those tallows. I could just take this and put it over the fire and just start slowly melting this fat out. But if you do it that way, it's a little bit more prone to burn and it'll stick to the bottom. And so what we're gonna do is take a little bit of water and put in this. Now, I said previously that one of the goals of rendering fat is to remove all the water. And so why are we adding water into it now? The water is going to help this fat render out without getting too hot. If you get it too hot and you get it to a point where it's smoking, it's not the end of the world, but it will definitely change the color and change the taste of the fat. So as this fat starts to liquefy and render, it's going to separate from the membrane and start to float on the surface of that water. So I'm just going to keep this fire going and keep this simmering and just add water as needed. That is looking really good. So as the fat heats, it's gonna separate from that membrane. And after a few hours, we can simply scrape out the membrane and let the fat cool to solidify. So we're also gonna be adding berries to this batch of pemmican. And again, they also need to be very dry. So there's two common ways to dry berries. One way is to simply break the skin of the berries and lay them in the sun to dry. But even under optimal conditions, this can take a long time. For this patch of berries, it took upwards of 10 days to fully dry. So these cherries have been out here for, oh, I don't know, probably 10 days or so. And they're nice and dry, probably as dry as they're gonna get. The other way to dry these berries is in some sort of a pot. If you're in a fully primitive situation, maybe you're working with a clay vessel, but today I'm gonna be using just a Dutch oven. So when this process is done, we're gonna end up with something that's kind of like a dehydrated, chunky cranberry sauce type of stuff, like a chunky fruit leather. All right, so I'm just gonna put this over the fire, pretty good ways above the fire. I don't wanna get this too hot. This fruit has a lot of sugar in it, and sugar will burn very easily. So I just wanna heat it nice and slowly just to drive some of that moisture off. So we've got all the different ingredients that's necessary to make our pemmican, and the fat that we rendered out is solidified in this pot. So I'm just gonna put this over the fire to liquefy this, and I'm gonna get it warm. I don't want it super hot, but just warm enough so that it's liquid. It's starting to get there, but not quite yet. All right, so our tallow is remelted. So we've got our meat pounded up. We've got a little bit of salt here in this container. Now salt, for pemmican, you don't have to have salt, but if you do, if you can get your hands on it, it's really gonna help to improve the flavor. I'm just gonna sprinkle in there, and you know, the amount of salt you use just depends on personal preference. I add some to start with, and then I kind of just fine tune it later on. The berries that you add, these things, if you get them dry, the shelf life on these is a long time. I've never actually maxed it out, but I know I have had dried fruit like this just out for well over a year, and it's perfectly fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and just dump these right in here. We got these little carbon. Look at that little guy. He's carrying away a piece of meat that's bigger than he is. Give that a little stir. Now I'm just trying to saturate everything, and it'll actually soak up quite a bit of fat. So traditionally this stuff would have been stored in rawhide bags, rawhide containers. Intestines were sometimes used as containers. And so I've got a little rawhide envelope here that I've made, and I'll just pack this full and then fold it over, tie it up, and then we'll use some of the leftover fat here to seal around the edges and seal this completely off. So we'll just go ahead and dip the seams of this down in some of this fat that I have. And we'll just hang it up, let it cool, be ready to go. We'll just hang this here and let it cool. Come back to it a little later. So typically if I'm making pemmican for just my normal outdoor adventures, I'll wrap it up in just waxed butcher paper like this. And this is a block of pemmican that I made last year, and it's just been sitting around in our pantry, no refrigeration or anything. And so we'll just open this up and give it a taste and see what it tastes like. So that's normal, that's what my pemmican normally looks like. So this pemmican was made with bison tallow, venison, dried blueberries, and then also when I make it at home, I like to add honey to it. It just makes it a lot better, and I like to eat it just like as a power bar. Smells just fine. The dogs seem to like it. But this has been sitting around, like I said, with no refrigeration, and it's not vacuum sealed or anything. It's just did a really good job of rendering out the fat, making sure all the moisture's out of everything, and it's perfectly fine. All right, so our primitive batch of pemmican should be cool, so we'll just go ahead and open that up and give it a taste. So this little rawhide pack is all sealed up with the fat that was left over, and it's all cooled, and it's very solid right now. And if you have a cool, dry place to keep this, it'll keep just like this for a very long time. So we'll just open this up. And that right there, I'm not sure how many calories would be in that. Maybe 600 calories or something like that. But a lot of times, that's all I'll eat all day long is a piece of pemmican that big. And it keeps me going. So this stuff is a lot more bland than the pemmican that I normally make. Normally I'll make it with freeze-dried blueberries, and I like to add honey, which really improves the flavor. And it's okay, you know, if you just wanted to sit here and eat it like this, it's okay. Especially if you're hungry. But the way that this would have mostly been used historically is simply to just take a piece like this, break it off, and throw it into a pot with whatever else you might have foraged that day. Maybe it was some wild mushrooms, some other wild game that you harvested, or whatever. And the best part about a primitive container like this, rawhide especially, is you can eat the container when you're done with it. You get done with all your pemmican, slice this up into strips and throw it into a pot, slow cook it. Hide scrapings historically would have been stored, like when Native Americans would tan bison hides and thin those hides, they would scrape those hides to thin them. And all of those scrapings would have been collected and stored for use later in the year. And those things are full of collagen. No. No. Okay. No, I don't want that. He's drooling. Stay. Stay. Nuh-uh. Stay. 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 Okay. There you have it. Primitive pemmican, the original power bar. Shelf stable, and zombies don't like it, as far as I know.